The medical bay doors hissed open as Ben Cole carried another batch of supplies from storage. 3 years working aboard Station Harmony had taught him to keep his head down and his movements predictable. Most species found humans unsettling enough without sudden gestures or loud noises. He set the boxes down carefully, aware of how Dr. Illis watched him from across the room with those large, nervous eyes that never quite met his own. "The supply manifests need updating," Illis said. His translator device, converting his chittering language into flat, emotionless words. "Before you leave today," Ben nodded. Illis was a centauri, one of the more common species in the galaxy. They looked like bipedal deer with forearms and soft gray fur. Their home world had never known predators until they reached space. Meeting humans had been a shock for them. Meeting anything with forward-facing eyes and sharp teeth had been a shock for them. The emergency alarm cut through the quiet bay before Ben could respond. Red lights flashed along the walls. Illis jumped, all 4 hands clutching at his workstation. Ben's training kicked in automatically. He moved to the communications panel. "Medical Bay, this is Security Chief R." A gruff voice announced through the speakers. "We have an incoming emergency. Dangerous animal injured and aggressive. Preparing containment room 7. Illis's hands shook as he pulled up the information on his screen. His face went pale under his gray fur. Ben walked over to look at the data. A transport ship had arrived with cargo from the fringe worlds. One of the containers held a Ripper, a creature from a distant planet known for extreme aggression. The file showed a being about twice the size of a human covered in dark scales with razor-sharp claws and multiple rows of teeth. "This is impossible," Illis whispered. "Why would anyone transport such a creature?" The answer came quickly as more information loaded. The Ripper was part of a research program studying predator species. It had broken containment during transport and injured 3 crew members before being subdued. Now it was wounded, bleeding from multiple places where the crew had been forced to use electric prods to drive it back into its container. "We need to prepare," Ben said. He started pulling out medical equipment, his hands steady despite the situation. "Prepare." Illis stared at him. "We cannot treat that thing. Look at it. Look at what it did to the crew." Ben looked at the images again. The Ripper was cornered in its container. Blood matting its scales. Its eyes were wide and its body was pressed against the back wall. To Illis, it probably looked like a monster ready to kill. To Ben, it looked terrified. "It's injured and scared," Ben said. "It's a killing machine," Illis corrected. He typed rapidly on his screen, his forehead moving in a blur. "I am recommending immediate euthanasia. We cannot risk station safety for one animal." Ben felt his stomach tighten. "We're veterinarians. We took oaths. Those oaths do not require suicide." Illis replied. His large eyes finally met Ben's and there was real fear there. "You do not understand, Ben. My people, we have no context for creatures like this. On my home world, the most dangerous animal was something that might kick if cornered. This thing, your kind, predators, you are nightmares, made real to us." Before Ben could argue further, Security Chief R.A. arrived with 4 armed guards. R.A. was also Centauri, but larger and more muscular than Illis. He wore reinforced armor and carried a weapon that hummed with barely contained energy. "The creature is in Containment Room 7, Raoul announced. "Dr. Illis, what is your assessment?" "Euthanasia," Illis said immediately. "It's too dangerous to treat," Raoul nodded. "Agreed. We'll use gas to avoid further risk to personnel." "Wait." Ben stepped forward. "Let me look at it first. Just let me assess the situation." Raoul's eyes narrowed. "You want to go in there with that thing?" "No, just let me observe it." Through the glass. 5 minutes. Relisis exchanged glances. Finally, R gestured toward the door. 5 minutes. Observation only. Then we proceed with euthanasia. Ben walked quickly through the corridors, followed by the security team. Other station personnel pressed themselves against the walls as they passed, staring at the human with mixed expressions of curiosity and fear. News traveled fast on the station. Everyone would know about the Ripper by now. Containment Room 7 was at the end of the medical wing, designed for quarantine cases. Through the reinforced glass wall, Ben could see the Ripper. It had been moved from its container into the larger space, but it hadn't moved much. The creature was huddled in the far corner, its breathing rapid and shallow. Blood dripped from wounds on its side and legs. Ben approached the glass slowly. Behind him, R and his guards kept their weapons ready. Through the barrier, the Ripper's head turned slightly, its eyes yellow with slit pupils locked onto Ben. For a long moment, neither moved. "It's protecting its left side," Ben said quietly. "See how it keeps that flank against the wall? There's a deep wound there, probably infected." The aggression on the ship was defensive behavior. It was in pain and confused, or it was hunting, R countered. "That is what predators do." "I'm a predator," Ben said, still watching the Ripper. "So, are you saying I'm just waiting to hunt everyone on this station?" R didn't answer immediately. It was a fair point, and they both knew it. Humans had spent 5 years proving themselves to the galactic community. 5 years of being watched, judged, and feared. 5 years of working twice as hard for half the trust. "That creature is not human," R finally said. "It does not have your intelligence or your control." "No," Ben agreed. "But it has fear and pain just like anything else. Give me a chance to help it." "Absolutely not." Illis had followed them and now stood in the doorway. "Ben, I forbid it. As your supervisor, I cannot allow you to enter that room." Ben turned to face them both. "Then I'm requesting to do it anyway on my own authority as a licensed xenobiologist. I'll sign whatever waivers you need." "This is madness," Illis said, his voice rising. "You will die. And for what? One animal." "For the principle that we don't kill patients just because we're afraid of them," Ben replied. Ral considered this for a long moment. Finally, he shook his head. "Request denied. We proceed with euthanasia in 10 minutes. Dr. Illis prepared the gas mixture." Ben's hands clenched into fists, but he forced himself to stay calm. Showing anger would only confirm their fears about humans. Instead, he watched the Ripper through the glass as Illis and R discussed the technical details of the procedure. The creature's breathing was getting worse. Without treatment, it might die from infection before the gas ever reached it. When R and his team left to coordinate the procedure, Ben remained at the glass. Illis came to stand beside him, his 4 hands clasped together nervously. "I am sorry," Ali said softly. "I know this is difficult for you, but you must understand we cannot risk hundreds of lives for one dangerous animal." "What if I went in there right now?" Ben asked. "What would you do?" Illis went very still. "Please do not. Please, Ben, I do not want to see you hurt. But you're willing to let that creature die without even trying to help it. That creature would kill you without hesitation." Ben finally turned to look at his supervisor. "You don't know that. You're guessing based on fear. Fear keeps prey animals alive." Illis replied. "It is why my species survived long enough to reach the stars. We learn to run from danger, not confront it. And humans learn to understand danger," Ben said. "To read behavior, to predict actions, to find ways to coexist with things that could kill us. That's how we survived, too." The gas canisters arrived, wheeled in on a cart by 2 more security officers. Through the glass, the Ripper stirred weakly. It had slumped further down the wall, its eyes half closed. Ben could see the infection spreading, dark lines radiating from the wound on its side. "Last chance," Raoul said, entering with the final authorization codes. "Do you have anything else to say, Dr. Cole?" Ben looked at the Ripper one more time. Then he looked at the security chief. "Yes, I resigned." The room went silent. Illis's mouth fell open. R's weapon lowered slightly. "What?" Illis finally managed. "I resigned from my position effective immediately," Ben repeated calmly. "Which means I'm no longer under your authority. Which means if I choose to enter that room as a private citizen, you can't stop me based on employment regulations. I can stop you based on safety regulations," R said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Can you?" Ben challenged. "I'm not station personnel anymore. I'm just someone requesting to see an animal. You'd have to explain to the Galactic Council why you prevented a qualified xenobiologist from attempting to save a research specimen. A very expensive research specimen, I might add." Ralph's jaw worked silently. Ben had found the loophole, and they both knew it. The Ripper belonged to a research institute that had powerful friends in the council. If there was even a chance it could be saved, and Raoul had prevented that, there would be questions. "You're insane," Ralph finally said. "Probably," Ben agreed. He walked to the containment room door and placed his hand on the access panel. "Open it, Ben." "Please," Illis begged. "Don't do this," Ben smiled at his supervisor. Despite everything, he had come to like Illis over the years. "It's okay. I know what I'm doing." "No one knows what they are doing with something like that," Ely said, but he stepped back. R made a gesture to his guards. They raised their weapons, aiming through the glass. "First sign of attack, we fire." "Understood." "Understood," Ben said. He took a deep breath and pressed the door release. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Ben stepped through the doorway and heard it seal behind him. The air in the containment room felt thick and warm, heavy with the smell of blood and something else, something sharp and acidic that reminded him of fear. The Ripper's head lifted slightly, those yellow eyes tracking his movement. Outside the glass, he could see Illis with all four hands pressed against the barrier and RA with his weapon raised. He didn't look at them. Instead, Ben slowly lowered himself to sit on the floor about 4 m from the injured creature. He crossed his legs and placed his hands in his lap, palms up and visible. Then he waited. The Ripper's breathing was loud in the silence. Each exhale came with a slight wheeze that worried Ben more than the visible wounds. Lung damage maybe from the electric prods, its eyes never left him, but it made no move to attack. Minutes passed. Ben could imagine the tension outside the glass. The guards with fingers on triggers waiting for the inevitable moment when the creature would lunge and tear him apart. It didn't. Instead, after 5 minutes of stillness, the Ripper's head lowered slightly. Not much, just a fraction, but enough that Ben recognized it. Exhaustion. The creature was running out of strength to maintain its defensive posture. "Hey there," Ben said softly. His voice seemed loud in the room. The Ripper's eyes narrowed but didn't close. "I know you don't understand me." "That's okay. I don't need you to understand the words." He kept his tone level and calm the same way his father had taught him years ago back on Earth. David Cole had run a wildlife rehabilitation center in the mountains of Colorado, taking in injured bears, mountain lions, wolves, anything that people feared and wanted removed. Ben had grown up surrounded by predators that everyone else wanted dead. "Animals don't listen to your words," his father used to say, while they sat outside a cage containing an injured cougar. "They listen to your body. They smell your fear or your calm. They see your eyes and know if you're a threat or not." The memory was so clear that Ben could almost smell the pine trees and hear his father's patient voice. That cougar had been shot by a rancher, wounded, but not killed. They'd spent 3 days sitting outside its enclosure before it allowed them close enough to treat it properly. 3 days of patience and stillness. Ben had that patience now. 10 minutes past 15:20. He didn't move from his spot on the floor. The Ripper's breathing was getting worse, the wee more pronounced. Its eyes were starting to glaze slightly, shock setting in from blood loss and infection. "You're in bad shape," Ben said conversationally. "I need to look at those wounds. But I can't do that if you're going to try and bite my face off. So, we're going to sit here until you understand that I'm not here to hurt you." Outside, Illis was talking frantically to someone on a communication device. Raw and his guards had lowered their weapons slightly, confused by the lack of action. Ben could see other station personnel gathering at a safe distance down the corridor, watching through the glass. 30 minutes. Ben's legs were starting to cramp, but he didn't shift position. The Ripper's head had dropped lower, now resting against the floor. Its flanks heaved with each breath. The dark lines of infection were spreading faster, creeping up its neck toward its head. "I know what happened," Ben said, still in that same calm voice. "You were in a cage on that ship. Probably too small, probably loud and scary. You got hurt somehow. Maybe from the transport itself. The pain made you aggressive. When you tried to escape, they hurt you more. Electric weapons, lots of pain. You weren't trying to hunt anyone. You were just trying to get away from the hurt." He slowly raised one hand, moving it with deliberate slowness. The Ripper's eyes tracked the movement and a low growl built in its chest. Ben stopped immediately and lowered his hand back to his lap. "Okay," he said. "Not ready for that yet. That's fine. We have time." Outside the glass, Raoul was shaking his head in disbelief. Ben could see him talking to Illis, probably arguing about how long to let this continue. Ben didn't care. He'd meant what he said about resigning. He had nothing to lose now except his life. And he'd already decided that some principles were worth that risk. 45 minutes. The Ripper's eyes were closing more frequently now, staying shut for longer periods. When they opened, they looked unfocused. Bad sign. The creature was slipping deeper into shock. If Ben didn't do something soon, all this patience would be for nothing. He tried raising his hand again, slower this time. The Ripper's eyes opened and focused on him, but no growl came. Progress. Ben moved his hand toward the medical pack he'd clipped to his belt before entering. The Ripper watched, but didn't react with aggression. "I'm going to get some supplies," Ben narrated. "Just medical things. Nothing that will hurt you." He unclipped the pack with agonizing slowness and set it on the floor beside him. Then he opened it, again, moving with exaggerated care. Inside were basic supplies, scanner, antiseptic, bandages. Nothing that required the full surgical bay, but enough to stabilize a patient. Ben pulled out the medical scanner first. It was a small device about the size of his palm that could read vital signs and identify infections from a distance. He held it up so the Ripper could see it, then pointed it in the creature's direction and activated it with his thumb. The scanner beeped softly. Data scrolled across its small screen. Ben read it and felt his worry deepen. The Ripper's core temperature was too high. Fever burning through its system, heart rate erratic. The infection had spread into the bloodstream. Without antibiotics, soon it would die, possibly within hours. "I need to get closer," Ben said. "I need to treat that wound on your side. If I don't, you're going to die. Do you understand that?" "Probably not, but I'm going to try anyway." He set the scanner down and picked up a medical injector loaded with broad-spectrum antibiotics. Then moving with the same careful slowness, he rose from his sitting position. His legs screamed in protest, cramped from staying still for so long, but he kept his expression neutral and his movements smooth. The Ripper's head lifted as Ben stood. Its body tensed, muscles bunching under the scales. Outside, the security guards raised their weapons again. Ben didn't look at them. He took one small step forward, then another. "Easy," he said softly. "I'm just coming to help. That's all. Just help." 3 steps. 4. He was halfway to the creature now. Close enough that if it lunged, he'd have no chance to avoid the attack. The Ripper's mouth opened slightly, showing those rows of sharp teeth. A warning. Ben stopped. "Okay," he acknowledged. "Too fast. My mistake." He stood still, giving the creature time to assess him. This was the critical moment. The Ripper had to make a choice to decide whether this strange two-legged being was a threat or something else entirely. Ben kept his eyes slightly averted, not meeting the creature's gaze directly. Direct eye contact meant challenge in most predator species, and he needed to show submission, not dominance. The Ripper's mouth closed, its head lowered back to the floor, not all the way, still watching, but the tension in its body had decreased slightly. Ben took another step, then another. Now he was close enough to smell the infection, a putrid odor that made his nose wrinkle. The wound on the Ripper's side was worse than it had looked from a distance. Deep, jagged, with tissue damage that suggested electrical burns. "This is going to sting," Ben said, though he knew the creature didn't understand. He knelt down slowly, so slowly that it took nearly a minute to reach the floor. The Ripper watched him with those yellow eyes, but didn't move. Ben raised the injector. The Ripper's eyes tracked it. He moved it toward the creature's shoulder, a safe spot away from the head and teeth. His hand was steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. The injector touched scale. The Ripper flinched but didn't pull away. Ben pressed the trigger. There was a soft hiss as the antibiotics entered the creature's system. Done. First treatment administered. He withdrew the injector and set it aside, then reached for the antiseptic spray. "Now I need to clean this wound," he explained, his voice still calm and low. "This part might hurt more. I'm sorry about that." He moved closer to the infected wound, near enough now that the Ripper could easily strike him. His hands were within range of those jaws. One bite would take off his arm at the elbow. He sprayed the antiseptic in a fine mist over the wound. The Ripper's entire body went rigid. A sound came from its throat. Something between a growl and a whimper. Ben kept spraying, working quickly now. The wound needed to be cleaned or the antibiotics wouldn't matter. "I know," he said. "I know it hurts. I'm sorry." Almost done. The cleaning took 3 minutes that felt like hours. When he finished, Ben sat back on his heels and let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The Ripper was breathing hard, its eyes squeezed shut in pain, but it hadn't attacked. Outside the glass, the entire gathering of station personnel stood in stunned silence. Illis had all 4 hands over his mouth. R had lowered his weapon completely. Ben reached for the bandaging supplies. This would be the hardest part. He needed to wrap the wound, which meant touching the creature extensively, moving around it, possibly causing more pain. He started with the edges, placing adhesive strips with gentle pressure. The Ripper's eyes opened and watched him work. "You're being very brave," Ben said. "Much braver than anyone out there thinks. They look at you and see a monster. I look at you and see someone who's been through something terrible and is trying to survive." He continued working, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. The bandaging took another 10 minutes. When he finished, the wound was covered, protected from further contamination. It wasn't perfect. Ideally, he'd have the creature in surgery, but it was enough to stabilize things. Ben slowly stood and backed away a few steps, giving the Ripper space. The creature watched him retreat. Then, to his amazement, its eyes slowly closed. Within seconds, the Ripper's breathing shifted to the deeper rhythm of sleep. Exhaustion and pain medication from the injection had finally overcome the fear and adrenaline. Ben walked to the containment room door and pressed the release. It opened and he stepped through. The moment the door sealed behind him, Illis rushed forward and grabbed him with all four hands. "You're insane," Ely said, his voice shaking. "Completely insane." "Maybe," Ben replied tiredly. "But it worked." Ral approached, studying Ben with new eyes. "I've never seen anything like that. How did you know it wouldn't attack?" "I didn't know," Ben admitted, "but I understood the risk. And I understood that creature better than it understood itself in that moment. Fear makes animals aggressive. Remove the fear, or at least reduce it, and you can reach them." "Remarkable," someone said from the crowd. Ben turned to see Lord Quinn, an Alteran trader he recognized from around the station. Quinn was tall and thin with crystalline skin that refracted light in rainbow patterns. "Absolutely remarkable." "I would like to speak with you, Dr. Cole," former doctor, Ben corrected. "I resigned, remember?" Illis made a sound of distress. "About that, I'm not accepting your resignation. You don't have a choice." "Yes, I do," Illinois said firmly. All four hands gripped Ben's shoulders. "You just demonstrated skills that no one else on this station possesses. If anything, you have proven that we need you here more than ever. Your resignation is denied." R nodded in agreement. The security chief concurs. "Your actions today may have saved not just that creature's life, but potentially dozens of lives down the line. If that Ripper had died and its research value had been lost, there would have been consequences." Ben looked at the Ripper sleeping peacefully through the glass. "I didn't do it for research value. I did it because it was the right thing to do." "I know," Illinois said softly. "And that is exactly why we need you." 3 weeks had passed since the incident with the Ripper. Ben walked through the market district of Station Harmony with a data pad in hand, reviewing his schedule for the day. What he'd expected to be a quiet return to normal work had turned into something else entirely. Word of what he'd done had spread through the station like electricity through a wire. And now his appointment list was full of cases that other veterinarians refused to handle. A Telosian merchant waved at him from her stall, her tentacles forming a gesture of respect. 2 Centauri younglings pointed at him and whispered to their parent, who quickly pulled them away despite their obvious curiosity. Ben had become famous or perhaps infamous depending on who you asked. Nera caught up with him near the fountain at the market center. She was young for a Centauri, barely into her adult years, and had recently joined the medical bay as an intern. Unlike most of her species, she didn't seem frightened of Ben at all. "Dr. Cole," she said slightly out of breath. "I've been looking for you. There's someone at the medical bay asking for you specifically." "Another impossible case?" Ben asked with a slight smile. "I think so," Nera replied. She fell into step beside him as they headed back toward the medical wing. "It's Lord Quinn. He's brought one of his private collection animals. Says it's dying and no one else can figure out why." Ben remembered the Alteran trader from the day with the Ripper. Quinn was wealthy and powerful, known for collecting rare creatures from across the galaxy. The fact that he was bringing one to Ben was significant. They arrived at the medical bay to find Lord Quinn standing in the center of the room, his crystalline body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. Dar. Illis was there, too, looking uncomfortable. Between them was a transport container large and sealed with cooling units humming along its sides. "Dr. Cole," Quinn said, his voice like wind chimes. "Thank you for coming so quickly. What can I do for you, Lord Quinn?" "I have a void serpent," Quinn said, gesturing to the container. "It has been ill for weeks. I have consulted the finest veterinarians in 3 systems. None can determine the cause. I watched what you did with the Ripper. I believe you might succeed where others have failed." Ben approached the container and looked through the viewing panel. Inside, coiled in the artificial darkness, was a creature he'd only seen in textbooks. Void serpents were rare, living naturally in the asteroid fields of the outer reaches. This one was about 6 m long with scales that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Even looking at it made his eyes hurt slightly. "What are the symptoms?" Ben asked. "Lethargy," Quinn listed. "Refusal to eat. Aggression toward handlers. Its scales are dull and it barely moves. I fear I'm losing it. These creatures are sacred to Altern, are they not?" Illis asked carefully. "Yes," Quinn replied. Void serpents represent the darkness between stars, the mystery of space itself. To own one is a great honor. To let one die through my negligence would be a great shame." Ben studied the creature through the glass. It looked terrible, nothing like the majestic beings described in the literature. Its scales were indeed dull, almost gray instead of the deep light-absorbing black they should be. Its movements were sluggish. "May I see its medical records?" Ben asked. Quinn produced a data pad and handed it over. Ben scrolled through screens of information, test results, attempted treatments, dietary logs. The previous veterinarians had been thorough. He'd give them that. Every standard test had been run. Everything came back normal. "Tell me about its habitat," Ben said, still reading. "A climate-controlled enclosure," Quinn replied. "Temperature, humidity, lighting, all optimized according to species requirements. Diet, synthetic proteins, vitamin supplements, all the necessary nutrients calculated precisely." Ben looked up from the data pad. "When did you acquire this serpent?" 6 months ago. It was healthy for the first 4 months. Then it began to decline." "And where is it housed?" "On my private vessel. Travel frequently for trade. The serpent travels with me." Something clicked in Ben's mind. He looked at the data pad again, this time focusing on the dietary information. Synthetic proteins, vitamins, all correct according to the textbooks, but textbooks were written based on creatures in captivity. "What if they were missing something, Lord Quinn?" Ben said slowly. "Void serpents live in asteroid fields in the wild." "Correct." "Yes, they hunt small asteroid-dwelling creatures. And these asteroids, they're rich in certain minerals. The serpents absorb these minerals through their food and even through contact with the asteroid surfaces." "I am aware of this." Quinn said, "The synthetic diet includes all known required minerals." "All known ones," Ben repeated. "But what if there's something we don't know about? Something specific to those asteroid fields that the serpent needs?" Illis stepped forward, interested now, despite his nervousness around the contained predator. "You're suggesting a deficiency of some sort?" "More than that," Ben said. "I think it's suffering from captivity stress combined with environmental deprivation. Look at the timeline. 4 months of health, then decline. That matches the time it would take for stored minerals to deplete from its system." "But the tests showed no deficiencies," Quinn protested. "The tests looked for known deficiencies," Ben corrected. "What if this creature needs something we haven't thought to test for?" He turned to Nara. "Can you access the geological surveys of the serpent's native asteroid field?" Nara moved to a workstation and began typing. Within minutes, data appeared on the screen. Ben studied it, comparing the mineral composition of the asteroids to the supplements in the serpent's diet. There, a cluster of rare earth elements present in the asteroids, but missing from the synthetic food. "I think I know what's wrong," Ben said. "But more than that, I think the creature is suffering from behavioral problems. Void serpents are active hunters in the wild. They navigate complex three-dimensional environments, solve problems, engage in natural behaviors. In captivity, even a large enclosure, they're essentially sitting still. That's not just physically unhealthy, it's mentally damaging." Quinn's crystalline form seemed to dim slightly. You are saying I have harmed it by keeping it unintentionally, Ben said carefully. You've provided everything you thought it needed, but you've kept it in a box, and some creatures can't thrive in boxes, no matter how comfortable. Then what do you suggest? Release it? I cannot. It would not survive reintegration to the wild after so long in captivity. Ben thought for a moment, then looked at the transport container again. An idea was forming, risky and probably controversial, but it might work. I want to try something, he said. But I need your permission, and I need you to trust me. What do you propose? Let me take the Serpent to Cargo Bay 12. It's being renovated right now, so it's empty. I can have some asteroid samples brought in and create a temporary environment where the Serpent can exhibit natural behaviors. Let it hunt for the minerals it needs. Let it move and explore. If I'm right, we'll see improvement within days. Ilyssa's forehands fluttered nervously. You want to release a dangerous predator in a cargo bay? In a controlled setting. Ben clarified with safety protocols, but yes, essentially I want to let it be what it is, a hunter, not a display piece. Quinn was quiet for a long moment, his crystalline body pulsing with inner light as he considered. Finally, he spoke. If you believe this will save my serpent, then I grant permission. But I have one condition. What's that? I must be allowed to observe. I want to understand what I have been doing wrong. Fair enough, Ben agreed. He turned to Ilys. I'll need your authorization to use the cargo bay. Ilys looked between Ben and the serpent container, clearly torn. Finally, he sighed. You know this is going to attract attention. The Preservation Council has been very vocal lately about human presence on the station. They're looking for any excuse to cause trouble. Let them complain, Ben said. A patient's life is more important than politics. The Preservation Council. Ben had heard about them, a political group that argued humans should be restricted or removed from the station entirely. They represented the more fearful factions among the non-predator species, those who saw humanity's presence as a threat to galactic peace. The incident with the Ripper had made them more vocal, not less. Very well, Isla said finally. But I want full safety measures, guards, containment protocols, everything. Agreed, Ben said. The preparations took 2 days. Cargo Bay 12 was cleared and cleaned. Asteroid samples were brought in from a mining operation, carefully selected to match the mineral composition of the Serpent's native environment. Safety barriers were erected, giving observers a safe place to watch. Security Chief R personally oversaw the installation of emergency containment fields. On the morning of the demonstration, a crowd had gathered. Word had spread through the station, and it seemed like half the population wanted to witness this. Ben could see faces pressed against the observation windows. Dozens of species all watching with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Nera stood beside him, her eyes wide with excitement and nervousness. I've never seen so many people interested in a medical procedure. It's not about the medicine, Ben said. It's about what I represent. They want to see if the human can do the impossible again, or if I'll finally fail and prove them right to be afraid. That's a lot of pressure. Yes, Ben agreed. It is. Lord Quinn arrived with the Serpent's container. He had dressed in formal crystalline armor, as if this were a ceremony rather than a medical treatment. Perhaps for him it was. The container was moved into the cargo bay. Ben checked all the equipment one final time, then turned to address the crowd through the communication system. What you're about to see is not a show, he said clearly. This is a medical treatment for a suffering animal. I ask that you remain quiet and calm. Any loud noises or sudden movements could agitate the patient and create unnecessary danger. He turned to reopen the container. The security chief hesitated, then activated the release mechanism. The container's front panel slid open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Slowly, the void serpent's head emerged from the darkness. It was even more impressive outside the container, its scales seeming to drink in the light until it looked like a tear in space itself. The crowd gasped collectively, the serpent's tongue flicked out, tasting the air. Its eyes, deep red like dying stars, scanned the cargo bay. Ben stood at the edge of the safety barrier, watching. This was the critical moment. If the serpent felt threatened, it could become aggressive. If it felt trapped, it might panic. He needed it to feel something else entirely. Curiosity. The serpent slithered fully out of the container, its 6 m length uncoiling across the cargo bay floor. It moved toward the asteroid samples, head low and cautious. When it reached the first chunk of space rock, it stopped. Its tongue flicked out again, touching the surface. Then to Ben's relief, the serpent began to rub its scales against the asteroid, back and forth like a cat scratching against a post. It was absorbing the minerals directly through its skin, something the textbooks had mentioned, but nobody had thought to replicate in captivity. The crowd watched in silence as the serpent moved from one asteroid to another, its movements becoming more energetic with each passing minute. It coiled around one large rock, squeezed it, and then moved on to explore another. This was natural behavior, the kind of environmental interaction it had been missing. Ben smiled. He'd been right. Now came the harder part, proving it could be sustained. Ben watched the void serpent move through the cargo bay with increasing confidence. After an hour of exploration, its scales had already begun to darken, regaining some of that light-absorbing quality that made the species so striking. The creature was recovering, responding to the environment in ways that no amount of medicine could have achieved. Lord Quinn stood beside him at the observation barrier, his crystalline body pulsing with what Ben had learned to recognize as strong emotion in Altern. "I have kept this magnificent creature in a prison," Quinn said quietly. "I thought I was honoring it by possessing it. Instead, I was slowly killing it." "You didn't know," Ben replied. "None of the experts you consulted knew either. That's the problem with studying predators and wild creatures. We can analyze them, test them, measure everything about them, but until we understand how they actually live, how they actually behave in their natural state, we're just guessing." Nera was taking notes on her data pad, recording every movement the serpent made. She'd been studying constantly since joining the medical bay, eager to learn everything she could. Now she looked up from her screen with a question. "Dar. Cole, how did you know this would work?" "The other veterinarians, they're not incompetent. They ran every test, followed every protocol. What did you see that they missed?" Ben considered how to answer. "I didn't see something they missed exactly. I asked a different question. They asked what was wrong with the serpent medically. I asked what was wrong with how it was living. Sometimes the problem isn't in the body, it's in the environment." A commotion near the cargo bay entrance interrupted them. Ben turned to see a group of protesters pushing their way through the crowd. They wore the silver badges of the Preservation Council and they were chanting something about human danger and station safety. Security guards moved to intercept them, but their leader, a tall centauri named Vorin, tucked past and approached the observation barrier. "This is exactly what we warned about," Vorin called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "A human releasing a dangerous predator, risking everyone's safety for his own ego." Ral stepped forward, his voice stern. "This demonstration was approved through proper channels. You have no authority to disrupt it." "We have the authority of concerned citizens," Vorin shot back. He pointed at Ben. "Your kind should never have been allowed on this station. Predators cannot be trusted. You say you're helping this creature, but you're just showing off your ability to control dangerous things. What happens when you can't control them anymore?" Ben felt anger rising, but forced it down. Getting defensive would only prove their point. Instead, he kept his voice calm and level. "I'm not controlling the serpent. I'm giving it what it needs to heal itself. There's a difference, is there?" Voron challenged. Or are you just playing with something deadly because you can't help yourself? Because it's in your nature to dominate and destroy. Before Ben could respond, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. Dar. Illis stepped forward, placing himself between Ben and Voron. All four of his hands were raised, trembling slightly, but held firm. That is enough, Phyllis said, his usually quiet voice carrying surprising authority. I have worked with Dr. Cole for 3 years. I have watched him show more compassion for suffering creatures than anyone I have ever met. If you want to discuss what is in someone's nature, let us discuss the nature of fear and prejudice. Voron's large eyes narrowed. You defend him after what his kind are. I defend competence and compassion, Illis replied. Yes, Dr. Cole is a predator species. Yes, that makes me uncomfortable on an instinctive level, but he has never given me reason to fear him. He has only given me reason to respect him. The crowd had gone silent watching this unexpected confrontation. Ben felt a surge of gratitude toward Illis, even as he worried about the consequences his supervisor might face for taking such a public stand. Voron looked like he wanted to argue further. But another voice spoke up from the crowd. Lord Quinn had left the observation barrier and now stood facing the protesters. I am Lord Quinn of the Alteran Trade Consortium, he announced, his crystalline body flashing with reflected light. The void serpent you see before you is mine, and it was dying until Dr. Cole's intervention. If you wish to file a complaint about his methods, you will need to explain to the Alteran Council why you interfered with the treatment of a sacred creature. I assure you, they will not be sympathetic. The threat was clear. Quinn had significant political influence and Voron knew it. The protesters' confidence wavered. He looked at his followers, then back at the cargo bay where the serpent continued its exploration, clearly healthier than when it had arrived. This isn't over, Voron said finally. People deserve to know the truth about humans. He turned and pushed back through the crowd, his supporters following reluctantly. The tension in the room eased, but Ben could see the concern on many faces. The Preservation Council was growing bolder. This confrontation was just the beginning. He turned back to the cargo bay, refocusing on the task at hand. The serpent had found a cluster of smaller asteroids and was weaving between them with increasing agility. Its movements were becoming more fluid, more natural. The mineral absorption was working, but Ben suspected there was more to the recovery than just physical healing. Nera, he called. Come here and watch this. The young Centauri in turn joined him at the barrier. What am I looking for? Watch how it moves between those rocks. See the way it tests each surface before committing its weight. That's problem-solving behavior. In the wild, void serpents have to navigate asteroid fields that are constantly shifting. They need to be smart, adaptable. In captivity, in a simple enclosure, that intelligence has nothing to work with. It's like asking a brilliant person to sit in an empty room forever. So, it was bored, Nera said with sudden understanding. Not just deficient in minerals, but mentally starved. Exactly. The physical illness was real, but it was a symptom of a larger problem. This creature needs challenge. Needs to use its natural abilities or it withers. Over the next few hours, Ben made detailed observations. The serpent's energy levels increased noticeably. Its scales continued to darken and regain their luster. Most importantly, when Ben tossed in some frozen prey items, the serpent showed hunting behavior for the first time in weeks, tracking the food and striking with precision. By evening, Lord Quinn was convinced. You were right, he said to Ben about all of it. But this creates a difficult question. I cannot maintain an environment like this on my vessel. Yet returning the serpent to the wild may be impossible after so long in captivity. What do I do? Ben had been thinking about this problem all afternoon. There might be a solution. Station Harmony has several unused habitation domes on its outer ring. With modifications, one could be converted into a proper habitat for creatures like your serpent. Asteroid samples, environmental complexity, enough space for natural behaviors. It wouldn't be the wild, but it would be much closer than a cage. You're suggesting I donate my serpent to the station? Quinn asked. I'm suggesting you give it a better life while still maintaining ownership. The station gets a unique attraction and research opportunity. You get to know your creature is thriving, and I get a patient I can monitor long-term to better understand the species. Quinn's crystalline body pulsed with light as he considered. I would want to be consulted on all decisions regarding its care. Of course, and it would remain Alteran property with appropriate cultural respect. Absolutely. Then I agree. I will fund the habitat construction myself. Consider it an investment in proper understanding. R, who had been listening to the conversation, stepped forward. If we're converting a habitat dome, I'll need to establish security protocols. Not everyone will be comfortable with a predator living on station. Let them be uncomfortable, Bill said, surprising everyone again. If they cannot learn to coexist with things that frighten them, then they will never grow beyond their fears. Ben looked at his supervisor with new appreciation. 3 weeks ago, Illis had been terrified of him entering a room with the Ripper. Now he was defending the rights of predators to exist in shared spaces. That was growth, real, and meaningful. The demonstration concluded successfully. As the crowd dispersed, Ben began the process of safely returning the serpent to its temporary container for transport back to Lord Quinn's vessel. The creature resisted briefly, clearly preferring its new environment, but eventually cooperated. Nera stayed behind to help Ben clean up the cargo bay. As they worked, she asked the question that had been on her mind all day. Dr. Cole, do you ever get frightened working with these creatures? Ben paused, holding a section of safety barrier every time. Fear is a useful thing, Nera. It keeps you alert, makes you careful. The trick is not letting it control you. I'm scared when I approach a dangerous animal, but I don't let that fear make me aggressive or defensive. I acknowledge it and then set it aside to do the work. The Preservation Council, they let fear control them. Yes, Ben agreed. And that's what makes them dangerous in their own way. Fear without understanding leads to hatred. Hatred leads to violence. I'd rather face an honest predator than someone who's convinced themselves that eliminating what they fear is righteous. They finished cleaning in silence. Both thinking about Voron's threats. Ben knew this wasn't over. The success with the serpent would only make the Preservation Council more determined to prove that humans were a threat. As if summoning trouble by thinking about it, Ben's communication device beeped. He checked the message and felt his stomach tighten. It was from station administration. A formal complaint had been filed against him by the Preservation Council, demanding a review of his medical license and his continued presence on the station. Problem? Nera asked, noticing his expression. Nothing I can't handle, Ben said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. He'd proven he could help dangerous creatures, but could he prove his own species deserved to be here? That was a much harder question. That night, in his small quarters, Ben reviewed the formal complaint. It was lengthy and detailed, listing every incident where he'd taken risks, every dangerous animal he'd worked with, every moment where something could have gone wrong. It painted a picture of someone reckless, someone who endangered others for personal glory. It wasn't true, but Ben could see how someone might believe it if they were already afraid. That was the real problem. No amount of success would convince people who had already decided what they wanted to believe. His communication device beeped again. This time it was a message from an unknown sender. Ben almost deleted it, assuming it was another threat from the Preservation Council. But something made him open it. The message was simple. Colony World Haven Outer Sector. Animal attacks. Multiple casualties. Local government requesting military intervention for extermination. Thought you should know. A friend. Ben stared at the message for a long time. Haven was a relatively new colony established in an area where the local wildlife hadn't been fully studied. If the colony was calling for extermination, that meant they'd given up on any other solution. He thought about the Ripper cowering and infected, minutes away from being euthanized because everyone was too afraid to try understanding it. He thought about the void serpent dying slowly in a comfortable cage because nobody had asked the right questions. How many creatures on Haven were about to die because people were too frightened to look for another way? Ben made a decision. He typed a response to station administration formally requesting a leave of absence to provide consultation services to Haven Colony. If they were going to review his license anyway, he might as well give them something real to review. Tomorrow he'd talk to or about transportation. Tonight he'd prepare for what might be the most important case of his career. Not because it would prove anything to the Preservation Council. They were already convinced. But maybe, just maybe, he could save some lives, both human and otherwise. The transport ship touched down on Haven Colony 3 days after Ben received the mysterious message. He stepped off the ramp into humid air that smelled of vegetation and something else, something wild and untamed. Haven was a young world, barely terraformed, where human colonists were still learning to coexist with the native ecosystem. R had insisted on coming along, bringing 2 security officers with him. Nera had volunteered as well, arguing that she needed field experience. Illis had approved her request immediately, perhaps sensing that this trip would be educational in ways that the medical bay never could be. The colony's administrator, a tired-out-looking woman named Governor Patel, met them at the landing pad. She wore practical clothes covered in dust, and her eyes had the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. "Dr. Cole," she said, shaking his hand with a grip that was probably stronger than she intended. "Thank you for coming. Though I'm not sure what you think you can do that our security teams haven't already tried." "Tell me about the attacks," Ben said, falling into step beside her as they walked toward the colony's administrative center. "They started 6 weeks ago," Patel explained. "Animals we call ridge stalkers. They're native to this world. Large predators that usually avoid our settlements. But something changed. They started coming into populated areas, attacking people, destroying property. We've lost 8 colonists so far and dozens more injured." "What changed 6 weeks ago?" Ben asked. Patel looked surprised by the question. "Changed? Nothing that I know of. We've been following the same expansion schedule we've had since landing." "Expansion schedule?" "New housing sectors, agricultural fields, mining operations, the usual colony development." Ben exchanged a glance with Nera. The young Centauri was already making notes on her data pad. She'd learned quickly to recognize patterns. They reached the administrative center, a prefabricated building that served as the colony's nerve center. Inside, Patel pulled up holographic displays showing the locations of each attack. Ben studied them carefully, noting the distribution, the timing, the apparent randomness of it all. Except it wasn't random. Not quite. All the attacks clustered around the colony's western perimeter where the newest expansion was taking place. "May I see your development maps?" Ben asked. "The ones showing where you've been building and clearing land." Patel pulled up another display. Ben overlaid it with the attack locations. The correlation was immediate and obvious. Every attack had occurred within 2 kilometers of new construction or land clearing. "You're expanding into their territory," Ben said simply. "We surveyed this area thoroughly." Patel protested. "The Riddijockers don't have fixed territories. They're nomadic hunters. That's what the xenobiologist told us." "Nomadic doesn't mean they don't have ranges," Ben countered. "And 6 weeks ago, you started building in the middle of their primary hunting ground, didn't you?" Patel pulled up the construction schedule. Her face went pale as she realized Ben was right. The western expansion had broken ground exactly 6 weeks prior. "So, what do we do?" she asked. We can't abandon the expansion. We have 300 new colonists arriving next month. We need that housing and the military strike. Ben asked. When is that scheduled? Tomorrow, Patel said quietly. Orbital bombardment of the known ridge stalker dens. It will eliminate the threat permanently. It will eliminate the species permanently. Ben corrected. How many ridge stalkers are we talking about? Estimates suggest maybe 40 to 60 individuals left on the entire planet. They're not exactly thriving even without our interference. Ben felt anger building but kept it controlled. This was the pattern everywhere. Colonists arrived on a world, started changing things to suit their needs. And when the native life pushed back, the solution was always extermination. Not relocation, not compromise, just death. I need to see one, Ben said. A Ridge stalker alive. That's suicide, Patel said flatly. These creatures are massive, aggressive, and extremely dangerous. I've heard that before, Ben replied. About every animal I've ever worked with, Raoul stepped forward. If Dr. Cole believes he can help, we should let him try. We came here for that purpose. Patel looked between them, clearly torn between hope and skepticism. Finally, she sighed. There's a pack that's been spotted in the forest north of here. They've claimed an area near what used to be a water source before our pipeline diverted it. We can take you there, but I can't guarantee your safety. I'm not asking you to, Ben said. The journey to the forest took 2 hours by ground transport. Ben used the time to review everything known about ridge stalkers. They were impressive creatures, standing nearly 4 m tall at the shoulder when fully grown, with 6 powerful legs and armored plating across their backs. Their heads were broad and flat with sensory organs that could detect vibrations in the ground from km away. They were also, according to the reports, fiercely protective of their young. Nara, Ben said, a thought occurring to him. When did the attack start exactly? What date? Nara checked her data pad. First attack was 43 days ago. And what's the gestation period for ridge stalkers? Nara searched through the xenobiology database. Her eyes widened, approximately 8 months, with young being born during the region's dry season, which started about 6 weeks ago. So, the attack started right when they would have had newborns, Ben said. And we started building right in their hunting grounds at the same time. They weren't attacking because they're aggressive. They were defending their young from what they perceived as an invasion. Patel was listening from the driver's seat. You're saying this is our fault? I'm saying it's a conflict of needs, Ben replied. You need space for your colony. They need space for their families. Nobody's wrong. You just need to find a solution that doesn't involve killing an endangered species. They reached the forest perimeter and continued on foot. R and his security team took point, weapons ready, but set to stun rather than kill. Ben had insisted on that. Behind them, Nara stayed close to Ben, her nervousness evident in the way her 4 hands kept fidgeting. I've never been this close to wild predators before, she admitted quietly. Neither have most of your people, Ben said. That's why this is all so hard for them to understand. Humans grew up with predators. We had to learn to read them, predict them, coexist with them. You're having to learn that all at once. They moved deeper into the forest. The vegetation was dense plants with thick leaves that filtered the sunlight into a green twilight. Ben could see signs of rider activity everywhere, broken branches at shoulder height, deep gouges in tree trunks where they sharpened their claws and tracks. Massive 6-toed prints pressed deep into the soft earth. Raoul held up a hand, signaling everyone to stop. Ahead through a break in the trees, they could see movement. Ben moved forward slowly, careful to make his footsteps heavy. Enough to be heard. Surprising a predator was never a good idea. The ridge stalker came into view, and Ben understood immediately why the colonists were terrified. It was enormous, easily 5 m from nose to tail, with muscles that rippled under armored plating. Its head swung toward them, and Ben could see the intelligence in its eyes. This wasn't a mindless beast. This was a thinking creature assessing a threat. Behind the large stalker, half hidden in the undergrowth, Ben spotted smaller forms. Young, 3 of them, maybe 4 weeks old if his estimates were right. "Everyone stay absolutely still," Ben said quietly. "We're looking at a mother with cubs. She's going to be extremely defensive." The mother stalker took a step forward. Her body language was clear. She was blocking their approach to her young. Her head lowered and a sound came from her throat. Something between a growl and a clicking noise. Ben slowly knelt down, making himself smaller and less threatening. "Easy," he said, his voice calm and low. "We're not here to hurt your babies," I hissed. "It can't understand you." "She can understand tone and body language," Ben replied, not taking his eyes off the stalker. "That's more important than words." The mother stalker took another step forward. Ben could smell her now, a musky scent mixed with the smell of the forest. She was close enough that one charge would cover the distance before anyone could react. Behind him, he heard the security officers adjusting their weapons. "Don't," Ben said firmly. "If you point those at her, she'll see it as a threat and attack to defend her young. Just stay still and calm." He shifted his weight slightly, moving to sit fully on the ground. Now he was as non-threatening as he could be while still maintaining visibility. The mother stalker paused, her head tilting slightly. Ben could see her trying to understand what this small soft creature was doing. Minutes passed. The forest was silent except for the sound of breathing and the distant calls of flying creatures in the canopy. Ben remained seated, occasionally shifting his gaze away from the stalker to show he wasn't challenging her. The mother's body language started to change. Her head rose slightly. The clicking sound softened. She was still alert, still ready to defend, but the immediate panic was fading. One of the cubs, braver or more curious than its siblings, emerged from the undergrowth. It was small, maybe the size of a large dog with oversized paws and armor plating that hadn't fully hardened yet. It looked at Ben with wide eyes. The mother immediately moved to intercept, placing herself between Ben and the cub. But the cub was determined, ducking under its mother's legs to get a better look at the strange visitors. Ben slowly extended one hand, palm down, fingers relaxed. The cub stretched its neck forward, sniffing cautiously. Its nose was wet and cold when it touched Ben's fingertips. The cub snorted, then sneezed and scampered back to its mother. The mother stalker looked at Ben for a long moment. Then, in a gesture that Ben wouldn't have believed if he hadn't seen it, she sat down, not lying down, not preparing to spring, but sitting in a posture that clearly said she was no longer considering them an immediate threat. Behind him, Ben heard Nara's breath catch. "This is incredible," she whispered. "This is understanding," Ben replied quietly. "She knows we're not here to hurt her family. Now we need to figure out how to keep it that way." He slowly stood, moving with exaggerated care. The mother stalker watched, but didn't tense. Ben backed away carefully, gesturing for the others to do the same. When they were a safe distance away, he turned to Patel. "Cancel the strike," he said. "What?" "Cancel the orbital strike. I know what needs to be done, but I need time. Give me 48 hours. Patel looked stunned. "You just sat down with one of the most dangerous predators on this planet and lived. I'm not sure whether you're brave or insane." "Neither," Ben said. "I just paid attention. These creatures aren't monsters. They're parents protecting their children. We can work with that." Ral nodded. "I support Dr. Cole's request. We should explore all options before resorting to extermination. Patel pulled out her communication device and made a call. After a tense conversation with someone in orbit, she turned back to Ben. You have 48 hours. After that, the strike proceeds as planned. What's your plan? Ben looked back toward where the mother stalker was still visible through the trees, now relaxing as her cubs played around her. First, I need to understand where their territory actually is and where they hunt. Then I need to figure out how to relocate them somewhere they won't conflict with the colony expansion. Relocate them? These creatures are massive. How do you propose to move them? Very carefully, Ben said with a slight smile. And with their cooperation, not by force. Over the next 2 days, Ben worked with barely any sleep. He mapped the ridge stalker territories, tracked their movement patterns, identified their water sources, and primary hunting grounds. Nera proved invaluable, her youth and eagerness to learn translating into tireless assistance. What they discovered was both encouraging and damning. The colony's expansion had cut directly through the most resource-rich part of the stalker's range. But there was another area to the north that had similar resources and was outside the colony's development plans. If the stalkers could be encouraged to relocate there, the conflict would end. The challenge was the how. Ben couldn't just explain the situation to them. He needed to make the new territory more attractive than their current one while making their current territory less comfortable. With 30 hours remaining before the orbital strike, Ben stood before the Colony Council presenting his plan. Holographic displays showed the current Ridge Stalker territories marked in red and the proposed relocation area marked in green. Governor Patel sat at the head of the table, flanked by the heads of security, agriculture, and resource management. You want us to help these creatures, the security chief said, his tone making it clear what he thought of the idea. The same creatures that killed 8 of our people. I want us to solve a problem without unnecessary death, Ben replied. On either side, the Ridgers didn't attack because they're inherently aggressive. They attacked because we invaded their space during their most vulnerable time. Give them a better option and they'll take it. How can you be sure? Patel asked. I can't be completely sure, Ben admitted. But I've studied their behavior for 2 days straight. They're intelligent, territorial, and follow predictable patterns. If we create a corridor of food and water leading to the new territory and simultaneously make their current territory less appealing, they'll move on their own. The agriculture chief leaned forward. You're talking about essentially baiting them. What stops them from just taking the bait and staying where they are? We'll be redirecting their existing water source to flow through the new territory, Ben explained. Without water, they can't stay. But instead of forcing them out through pressure, we're giving them somewhere better to go. It's the difference between eviction and offering a nicer home. And the timeline, Patel asked. The strike is scheduled in 30 hours. I need 24 hours once we start the operation. If the stalkers haven't begun relocating by then, I'll concede that it won't work and you can proceed with your original plan. The council members exchanged glances. Finally, Patel nodded. You have your 24 hours, Dr. Cole, but understand if anyone dies because we delayed the strike, that's on you. Ben felt the weight of that responsibility, but nodded acceptance. Understood. The operation began immediately. Colony engineers worked to redirect the water pipeline, creating a new flow that would run through the northern territory. Ben and Nera worked with the agricultural team to set up feeding stations along a route leading from the current Ridge Stalker dens to the new area. They used local prey animals already dead from natural causes or colony farming. Arranged in a trail that would be impossible for hungry predators to ignore. Ralph coordinated security, ensuring colonists stayed clear of the operation zone. The last thing they needed was someone wandering into the path of a migrating pack of massive predators. As evening approached, Ben returned to the forest where he'd first encountered the mother stalker. He could hear movement in the undergrowth, the distinctive sound of 6-legged locomotion through dense vegetation. The pack was active, probably preparing for a night hunt. Do you really think they'll follow the trail? Nera asked, standing beside him at what they designated as a safe observation point. Predators are practical, Ben said. If we offer them easy food leading to abundant water and their current water source dries up, the logical choice is to follow the food. They're not stupid. They'll recognize the benefit, but they're not human. They don't think like we do. No, Ben agreed. But they think. That's what matters. Too many people see predators as mindless killing machines. The truth is, most predators are cautious and efficient. They don't take unnecessary risks. They find the path of least resistance to survival. Movement in the trees caught his attention. The mother stalker emerged from the forest, her cubs following close behind. She'd grown somewhat accustomed to Ben's presence over the past 2 days, though she still maintained a careful distance. Her head turned toward them, acknowledging their presence. Then she moved toward the first feeding station. She sniffed the offering carefully, testing it for danger. Satisfied, she tore off a chunk and carried it back to her cubs. They swarmed it eagerly, their small teeth working at the meat. While they ate, the mother returned to the station and began feeding herself. Other members of the pack appeared. Ben counted 6 adults and 9 cubs total. The pack was smaller than he'd hoped, confirming that the species was indeed struggling on this world. Losing them to an orbital strike would be devastating to their survival as a species. Over the next several hours, Ben and Nera watched the pack methodically work their way through the feeding stations. As predicted, they moved along the trail, drawn by the easy food and the scent of water in the distance. By midnight, the pack had traveled nearly 3 kilometers toward the new territory. It's working, Nera said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. So far, Ben cautioned. But we're not done yet. The real test comes tomorrow when they discover the new water source and have to decide whether to stay or return to their old range. They returned to the colony to rest. Ben managed about 3 hours of sleep before his communication device woke him. It was raw and his voice was tense. We have a problem. One of the colonists, a teenager, snuck out to watch the ridge stalkers. He's trapped in a tree about half a kilometer from the new territory. 2 stalkers have him cornered. Ben was on his feet instantly, pulling on his boots and jacket. I'm on my way. Tell everyone to stay back. Do not, under any circumstances, shoot at those stalkers. The boy's parents are demanding we do something. I am doing something. Just give me 20 minutes. Ben ran through the pre-dawn darkness, guided by the coordinates R had provided. He could hear the commotion before he saw it. The teenagers' panicked shouts, the clicking growls of the stalkers, the worried voices of the security team maintaining a perimeter. He burst through the tree and assessed the situation immediately. The boy, maybe 15 years old, had climbed a large tree to get a better view of the stalkers. Unfortunately, he'd climbed too close to their path. 2 adults had spotted him and viewing him as a potential threat to the cubs further along the trail had moved to contain him. They weren't attacking. That was important. They were guarding, keeping the perceived threat pinned until the vulnerable cubs were safely past. Dr. Cole, Raoul said, appearing beside him. The parents are demanding we shoot the stalkers. If you shoot them, the rest of the pack will attack to defend themselves, Ben said firmly. Then people will definitely die. Just keep everyone back and let me handle this. He walked forward slowly, making sure his footsteps were loud enough to announce his presence. The 2 stalkers turned their heads toward him. One of them was the mother he'd encountered before. Her eyes met his, and he saw recognition there. Hey, Ben said softly. Remember me? I'm the one who sat with you and your babies. The mother stalker clicked, a sound that was almost questioning. The second stalker, a male, judging by his larger size and more pronounced armor plating, positioned himself between Ben and the tree. Protective but not immediately aggressive. Ben kept walking forward until he was only a few meters from them. Behind him, he heard gasps from the security team. In the tree, the teenager had gone silent, probably too terrified to make any sound. "That boy up there," Ben said, gesturing slowly toward the tree. "He's not a threat. He's young and stupid, but not dangerous. Your cubs are already past this point. You don't need to guard anymore." Obviously, they didn't understand his words. But Ben was counting on his body language and tone to communicate intent. He turned his back on the stalkers, a gesture of ultimate trust, and addressed the tree. "Hey, kid," he called up. "What's your name?" Peter," the boy stammered. "Okay, Peter, I need you to listen very carefully. I'm going to walk back the way I came. When I do, these stalkers are going to follow me because I'm going to lead them away from you. When they're clear, you're going to climb down very slowly and walk, not run. Back to the security perimeter. Understood?" "They're going to eat you," Peter said, his voice shaking. "No, they're not. They're not hungry, and I'm not acting like prey. Just do what I said." Ben started walking backward, keeping his movements steady and predictable. The mother stalker watched him for a moment, then took a step in his direction. The male followed her lead. Good. They were tracking him instead of maintaining their guard position. Ben continued backing up, drawing the stalkers away from the tree. 20m30. He could see Peter starting to climb down, moving with agonizing slowness. The boy's hands were shaking, and he nearly lost his grip twice, but he kept moving. When Peter's feet touched the ground, Ben called out without turning his head. "Walk away now, Peter. Slow and steady." The boy did as instructed, moving toward the security perimeter. The stalkers' heads turned briefly to track his movement, but Ben made a soft clicking sound with his tongue, mimicking their communication. Their attention returned to him. Once Peter was safely with the security team, Ben stopped backing up. The two stalkers stopped as well, regarding him with what he could only describe as curiosity. The mother tilted her head and Ben recognized it as the same gesture she'd made when he first sat down near her cubs. "You're trying to understand me," Ben said, "just like I'm trying to understand you. We're not so different, you know, both just trying to protect what we care about." He slowly lowered himself to sit on the ground again, the same posture he'd used before. The mother stalker made a soft clicking sound and sat as well. The male remained standing, still cautious, but the tension had broken. They stayed like that for several minutes. Then the mother stood, turned, and walked back toward the trail leading to the new territory. The male followed her. Neither looked back. Ben waited until they were out of sight before standing and returning to the perimeter. Rao met him with an expression that mixed relief and disbelief. "That was the most reckless thing I've ever seen," the security chief said. "That was calculated trust," Ben corrected. "There's a difference." Peter's parents rushed forward, his mother embracing him, while his father turned to Ben with tears in his eyes. "Thank you. Thank you for saving our son. Thank your son for following my instructions," Ben said. "And maybe have a conversation with him about why wandering around near dangerous wildlife is a bad idea." As dawn broke, Ben and Nara returned to their observation post. They found the entire pack gathered around the new water source in the Northern Territory. The cubs were playing in the shallows while the adults drank deeply. The mother stalker lay on a sunny rock, looking more relaxed than Ben had seen her. "They've accepted the new territory," Nara said, checking her scanner readings. "Look at their stress hormones. They've dropped significantly. They feel safe here," Ben smiled. "Because they are safe here. No construction, no colonists, plenty of resources. This is what they needed all along." Governor Patel arrived by transport an hour later. She stood beside Ben, watching the pack through binoculars. "I'll be honest, Dr. Cole, I didn't think this would work. I was certain we'd have to proceed with the strike. Most people think violence is the only solution when dealing with predators, Ben said. But violence should be the last resort, not the first response. These creatures weren't evil or mindless. They were just trying to survive in a world that was changing around them. So, what happens now? Patel asked. Now we establish a wildlife corridor, Ben replied. A protected zone between the colony and the stalker's new territory.